everything you do has a really strong and clear reaction. I've always liked it when food's kind of an adventure.
How many home bakers here? Be honest. Oh, all right, good.
Great.
Preaching to the choir.
How many of you have made pie dough before? Wow, I'm intimidated now.
Are you really?
Yeah, usually when I ask this question in our class, there's like 2 people who are like,
Yeah.
But here we are and we're gonna do it. To get started, I've got, I like to use a stainless steel bowl. This one's nice and wide so that I can really get in there with my hands.
It's a big, beautiful Vollrath bowl, everyone.
Oh, wow,
That's what it is,
yeah. And I'm gonna put some flour in here. This batch size that I'm making will make enough for 2 pies, 2 single crusted pies, or 1 double crusted pie. So it's like 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour. And it actually is 325 grams, but I like to use cups sometimes, which I know is not
it's so not
cool
baking.
Yeah, it's not cool baking.
Yeah. King Arthur, or what do you jam with for your flour?
Yeah, we use King Arthur all-purpose flour.
Yeah.
Then we're gonna do a teaspoon of salt, granulated sugar. Put that in there, and then I just mix that up with my hands. The next thing I always do is travel to my freezer. I learned this great trick when I was working. I actually worked at a place called 4 and 20 Blackbirds in Brooklyn.
Sure.
Just for a summer, and that was kind of where I got my really quick pie training before I actually knew that I was going to be doing this for a living. Yeah, but I only worked there 1 day a week, so they kind of just like taught me how to make pie dough and roll it out. So I just had this awesome experience of
You're here once
doing
a week.
that.
What good are you? Just do this.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I needed. And so, because pie dough is all about repetition, right? So, but anyway, I learned this great trick there for making pie dough in bulk, and I use it when I'm making a small batch, and we do it at the bakery too, which is that you take a liquid measuring cup about a couple of hours before you're going to make the dough, fill it with 1 inch or so of water, and then let it freeze. Take it out right at this point, and then just fill it with some water from the tap. What this does is it allows the water to fully chill while you make the dough, whereas in the past, I would always make the ice cup of water at the very end, and it actually wouldn't get cold. But also, the most annoying part is that the ice cubes would fall in as I was trying to measure it.
Yep, I know it. I've lived it.
And so this is nice. It just sits here, it chills. One other thing, though, we're going to add just a healthy splash of apple cider vinegar.
Or I'm the guy that's racing back and forth to the freezer. Like, is it cold now? Is it?
Exactly. This is this is good.
Yeah.
So I add that until it looks kind of like the color of apple juice. Now, people always used to say that adding apple cider vinegar to the dough would inhibit the gluten formation, which would lead to a flakier crust. But when I was writing that cookbook, I wanted to make sure that I knew exactly what I was talking about.
Right.
Like everything else I do in my life, it's like I can do it once and then forget about it forever. But with the cookbook, not so much. It's there in print. And so I did some research, and the pie science that I came across said that actually wasn't proven. But we keep it. I really like the tanginess that the apple cider vinegar brings to the dough. And I think with pie, sometimes it's fun to keep those traditions alive, even if they don't really mean that much at all. So, and this is a relatively simple one to keep. Also, it would have been really weird for me to suddenly be like, no more apple cider vinegar. Like, we're totally changing this recipe. Anyway, so now I've got my liquid and my dry. I just need some butter. So I think there's some butter hanging out in this fridge. I like to use a European style butter for all of our baked goods. And so, it is a higher fat butter, so it has a higher butter fat percentage than traditional American style butter.
Yep.
And that just leads to a flakier, more flavorful dough.
Yeah.
I think my little microphone's fallen off, but I got it fixed.
Still, it's good there.
Great.
Yeah.
And so that's why we use it. We want to do everything we can to ensure that this pie dough is just as delicious and special as whatever we're going to put inside of it. I think oftentimes when people don't like pie, like maybe those 2 people in the audience, it's because they haven't tasted a really good pie crust.
I mean, the crust is so, nearly everything.
Yeah.
It's like an action movie without a car chase. If you don't have a good crust, you really haven't arrived.
What are you even doing?
Yeah, exactly.
So
you're not all sliced up into little pieces?
I will.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So this is a half pound of butter, 2 sticks of butter, 16 tablespoons, a cup. I'm going to just coat it with some flour on all sides. And now I'm going to work quickly to break it into cubes. I've got a few different ways of doing this to get us to the final product. So first I'm going to hold the butter. You can see this, right?
Yep.
Okay. I don't know why I'm looking up at that, but I'm going to hold the butter and I'm going to slice it 3 times across all the way down to the bottom of the bowl. Then I'm going to kind of try to bring the butter back together into a block, turn it down, and slice it 3 more times across. You always want to do this with the butter straight from the fridge. I'm going to now work quickly with my hands to break up the butter into little cubes. While I'm doing that, I'm just coating them in flour. And I'm working quickly because I don't want the butter to melt, and I'm going to tell you why in just a moment's time. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to my bench scraper to embrace the versatility of it, and I'm going to break up the butter even more. So this part, I like to rotate the bowl and just slice down to the very bottom of the bowl. And I always tell people that you should make noise doing this, like lots of noise, because you don't want to just kind of go like this. You want to make sure that everything you do with pie dough making is very intentional and has a really strong and clear reaction. Because you don't want the butter to be getting warmer based on...
Because science.
Because science. And yeah, and I'll even explain that further. So I do this step for like probably 40 seconds to a minute until it looks like I've cut each chunk of butter in half. Of course, it's a little bit tough to completely monitor that, but...
So are you going for the quintessential little pea-size?
Well, I'm not
chunks?
yet, but I will be.
You will be.
I'm
Okay.
about to.
All
So
right.
I've done that. I'm going to put this down for now. And then this is a pastry blender. You know, it's what we use to cut butter into flour. So you can use it to make scones or biscuits, pie dough. And what's great about it, it has these 4 or 5 blades typically. They're not as sharp as a knife, but they will cut you, so I always say please be careful. Okay, so then you're going to use this kind of like a rocking motion. I also like to rotate the bowl just to make sure I'm kind of evenly incorporating it. Rocking the pastry blender down in the very center of the bowl. Just like with the bench scraper, I'm making sure to slice through the butter every time, and then every once in a while I'll just do this. I'll clean out the bench scraper or the pastry blender to make sure that that butter doesn't get clogged up. Because if it gets clogged up, it's probably going to start to get warm, and then things that are bad will happen. Now, what I'm looking for right now is what you mentioned. I'm looking for little pea-sized bits of butter, and everything else should kind of look like really finely grated Parmesan cheese. Now I can go a little bit faster and look like a crazy person because the butter is smaller.
You don't look like a crazy person. You look like the people in the movies where they speed up the film.
Yeah. Okay, so now you can see beautifully that we've got these kind of pea-sized bits of butter, little spring
You're melting
peas.
them in your hand. This is driving me crazy.
Wow. And then everything else is kind of like that finely grated Parmesan cheese. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to add some liquid. We actually add a half cup of liquid every time into this recipe. So I'm going to use this little guy to do 4 tablespoons, which is, no, actually it'll be 8 tablespoons because that's a half cup. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hopefully I don't lose track. 6, 7, 8. Okay, that was a half cup of liquid. And now I'm going to use the bench scraper to move the ingredients around until we don't see visible pools of liquid anymore.
So what blows me away is that baking is so precise, and you just added precise amounts of an imprecise liquid combination.
Yeah.
Like,
It's true. I mean, that's
I
the thing.
kind of have culinary whiplash right now.
I mean, the thing I like about pie, though, is that I feel like I can kind of mess things up a little bit. You know what I mean? Like,
No.
okay. Like, I don't think it's like as scientific as like making cake or something. Like, I think that as long as I know the basic techniques, I can kind of improvise a little bit.
All right. Well,
But
you're the one with the cookbook on the New York
I
Times
guess so,
list. I'm just going to...
So now I'm going to bring the dough together using my hands. So I want to work really quickly. So I employ 3 basic steps. I'm going to scoop up as many of the ingredients as I can, press them down onto themselves, rotate the bowl, and repeat. Scoop, press, turn. Scoop, press, turn. If any butter flies out, make sure you get it. scoop, press, turn. I think the mistake that people often make in pie dough making is that they take it too far, or they don't take it far enough. And so I like to do this until I don't see all this dry flour at the bottom. And by the way, you can always just kind of scoop up whatever's down there with your hands, place it on top, do a big press.
Thank God you have a sturdy, well-shaped Vollrath bowl for this.
Yeah, it's really helping me out.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So now it looks like I don't have too much of the silky flour at the bottom. Slide this over here. And now I'm left with this nice chunk of dough. Whew, that was working. Okay, so then you're gonna take the bench scraper. And you know, when we make batches at the bakery, we're making them like 4 to 8 times this size, but we're still making them by hand.
Right.
And so we're measuring the dough into 325 grams each. But when we're making just a single batch like this, it's easy enough to just cut it in half.
Kind of eyeball it.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
then I always just do one of these.
Yep.
Oh, that was pretty perfect. And then to shape it, you want to do this part really quickly because at this point, the dough is made. You don't want to touch
Yeah.
it too much more, and it's the warmest it's going to be until it goes back into the fridge. So first, I kind of flatten it in my hands, do a little circle thing. Then I place it on the top of the counter, press it down. At this point, you see how there's these edges, these cracks. I'm
It's
just
like a
going to
smash burger.
really quickly fix those up. Set that to the side. I'm going to grab a little flour from my container. Just a little bit. Don't want to add too much. Flatten it. Press it down. Okay, so now I've got these 2 beautifully stacked discs of dough. And I would just wrap them up in some plastic. And then I'm just going to wrap this dough twice. And I wrap it twice because I want to make sure. Actually, one of my biggest things for this year is trying to eliminate single-use plastic in our kitchen.
Boom.
But here I am using it twice on one thing. But
Yeah.
we will eventually transition to that. In the meantime, we want to make sure that no air or moisture gets into the dough when it's in the fridge. And also, if you had something really strong in your fridge, like a big pile of roasted garlic just sitting open, uncovered,
Yeah.
as I often do with most of my food because I live alone,
You sounded like you were speaking from experience, maybe during the R&D days.
it's like every time I teach a pie class, I had just roasted some vegetables at home, and so I always leave them in my fridge uncovered. So it is very much speaking
Sure.
from experience. Okay, so this is just going to go straight into the fridge or freezer.
Our worry is don't put it next to rosemary. Just don't put it next to the rosemary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good point.
Yeah.
So it would live in the fridge for up to a week if you think you're going to make pie dough within that week, like we're going to do tonight, and make pie rather. And if not, you can put it in the freezer. It can live in there for probably a year, I
Yeah,
would say.
yeah.
And then you just want to kind of defrost it for a day in your fridge. Then we always want to wait a full 2 hours before we go to roll out the dough because it needs to chill. And here I have it. So I've got some dough that's been chilling.
That's more of a brick than a disc.
Well,
Through the power of television.
yeah, it doesn't look quite like my,
Yeah.
but I can do this. Just a nice little,
There we go. Thank you.
yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit of flour on the counter. I'm going to get a little bit of flour on each side. And the step to the rollout process kind of is 3 parts. The first part is, sometimes when people make pie dough, they'll take it out of the fridge and kind of let it sit out. I don't really like that because I like to be able to control the temperature change
Yep.
every step of the
I
way.
know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So to do that, I'm going to do this first step, which is just kind of banging the dough. It's going to kind of start to bring it up to room temperature a little bit. It's also going to begin the flattening process.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
takes out some good aggression that you're probably feeling at any moment. Just like that.
And you can't do this with one of those rolling pins, well, with a non-French rolling pin.
Right. I like
Yeah.
the French rolling pin a lot. It feels very light in my hand. It kind of feels like an extension of my body. It's really easy to use. And so I roll it out till it's about a 1/2 inch thick. And at this point, I can just kind of roll it into more of a circle, just like that. Step 2 is to begin to roll out the edges because we want to be really mindful of rolling those out first because it's easier to over-roll them because they're on the edge. They're going to get warmer more quickly. And so we want to focus just on rolling them out one single time and then really do the center for the rest of it. So I'm going to place the rolling pin on, one end of it is going to rest right on the board, and then the center of the rolling pin will rest on the edge of the dough. The rolling pin is just going to stay in this position the whole time. The dough will travel around it. So I'm just going to do one big push, lift up the pin. 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 And it just looks like we have one more. And now we've gone around the whole dough. So now I've got a slightly thinner edge and a thicker center. So I'm going to work on the center for the biggest chunk of time.
Do you think the dough gets dizzy after all this smush and turn stuff?
I don't know, but I feel dizzy. Okay, so I'm going to place the rolling pin in the very center. I'm going to push forward, stopping about a ½ inch before the edge of the dough, since I've already worked on that. Rotate, push forward, rotate, push forward. And the rotations can kind of change based on the shape. Right now I'm doing a few more because it's kind of a little bit of a square right now. Push forward, rotate, push forward, rotate. I'm just going to keep doing this. And actually, if you wouldn't mind handing me that tin, that could be the first way you help me.
I can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So right now in this initial big rollout, I'm trying to get the disc to be a little bit larger than this 9-inch tin. And if at any point, it's hard to do this, that means that you might want a little more flour. So what I usually do is I'll just grab it from the table so that I'm not adding a ton more flour. This dough has all the flour it needs, so we don't want to dry it out by adding too much. So just use a very little bit.
There's all these little nuances that I've never worked into my pie. This is so great.
Well, it's just, you do this over and over and over again.
Yeah.
You're bound to pick up.
Yeah.
You hope that you pick up something. I'm moving this too. Wow. I'm so strong. See how, it's like a little bit bigger than the tin. So now I'm gonna try to relax a little bit. And I'm going to roll all the way to the edge. Because now if I can feel, actually it's pretty even across, but I'm gonna gently roll all the way to the edge so that we can get it to be about 13 and a half inches. Now I'm gonna take this sort of funny shaped crust, fold it, place it right in the center of the tin. I love these tins because they've got the circles so I can see right where the center is. I'm going to unfold it gently. And now I'm going to kind of try to make sure that there's some even bits all around. It looks like I think because of the shape, I sort of rolled out longer on this side and this side, but we're going to make it work.
Yeah?
So then I'm going to press it into, it'll be a learning lesson for everyone involved. Most of all me. No. So now we're going to kind of roll it up. And at this point, I could also, you only want an inch or so hanging over, so you might want to trim some of it. So I'm pretty sure why this knife is here. So you can trim a little bit of it, because now we're going to do the roll up. And to roll up the dough before we crimp it, we need to imagine that we're rolling a piece of paper so tightly that no air could escape. And so you're not folding the dough over. You're actually kind of twirling it up. So to do that, I'll take my thumbs, and I kind of rest my thumbs on the very edge of the tin. Because what I really want to make sure when I do this is that the crimps are sitting almost over the edge of the tin. That's what's going to really prevent the crimps from falling in when we do the blind bake. So to do this, I'm going to take my thumb and roll down. My right thumb's rolling down. My left thumb is taking what I've just rolled and gluing it to the top of the tin. So that will also prevent the crust from falling in. And
now this I could watch a video of to fall asleep. This is fascinating. It's very meditative.
And this is something that really took a lot of practice, and it does for every single person who works at the bakery.
You're super fluid.
Because you're not just going fold, right? You're really twisting it, and so it almost ends up having this little angle to it.
It's like a braid.
And then when you go to cut into the pie, it's got this beautiful twirl to it. And so we're making a nice thick ring of dough, which will be great for crimping. And you can see, if I flip it, that you can kind of see the dough all the way around.
Yeah. Where'd you learn that?
I mean, I think I learned part of this at 4 and 20
4 and 20?
Blackbirds,
Mm-hmm.
but it's hard for me to just, because that was just such a short time in my life, and then, 7 years later, I've had this pie shop. So it's hard for me to sometimes remember what was from them and what's just kind of come up.
Right.
I think it's a mixture of things. But so now the crimps. So just like I learned at 4 and 20, we like to do dramatic crimps because the dough, when it bakes, it'll just like puff up and become so gorgeous that if you did small crimps, they'll oftentimes kind of disappear. And so to do a dramatic crimp, I'll take my left hand and make a C, and then my right hand will have the thumb, and that's kind of the crimp shape, like that. So what's going to happen is the C is going to just come up to the ring of dough, and the thumb is going to push into the tin. The C isn't really going to move too much.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's just...
There's your drama.
There's the drama. And ideally,
my
this
family's
is
going to
ideal.
think I'm so cool after this.
I bet. I mean, I hope they already think you're kind of cool, but yeah. So like this is the best because you can't see the tin at all. That's kind of really what you're going for, is to not see that tin, because that's really going to ensure that that crimp is going to stay up on this tin, and that allows you, of course, to put as much filling in there as you might need. And so at this point, like I've got a couple spots where I broke the dough a little bit. And so I'm going to just take some of my scraps.
It's like the whiteout of baking dough.
Press it in. I know. It's really helpful, And even sometimes after we blind bake, we'll end up with little cracks, and so we'll take tiny little pieces of dough and fix it, and then we don't have a wasted crust, Okay, so that's that. I'm going to put this in the freezer. So I like to rest my crimp for about 15 minutes before I blind bake it. But with the magic of baking, I've got one right here.
The magic of the great culinary, or the pastry and
The
baking
magic of the pastry school here, yeah. So they've done this crust for me. And I'm going to take, could you pass me that stuff? Beans, and also that sheet of foil.
Yeah. So we use rice.
Yeah, at home?
Is that cool?
Do you use it over and over again?
A couple, 2-3 times.
Okay.
We have a little hatch mark system.
The nice thing about beans is that you can really use them a ton.
Yeah.
Like we replace our beans at the bakery maybe once every 4 months, which means that you could probably replace them, like, I don't know, every 10 years or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
But
should
you maybe make a lot of pie. So
No, we don't.
know.
We should switch to beans.
But everyone should just have a nice quart of beans in
It's
their
very
house.
colorful. You could have just gone with one bean.
I had no say in that.
I can
That
see
was
the
really
artistry
nice.
coming through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm going to take this frozen crust. It's easier to do this step when it's frozen because you don't have to worry about
Right.
messing with the crimps. And so I'm just going to take this foil and wrap it around. This is creating a nice barrier between the dough and the weights. And these weights, these beautiful beans, are going to weigh down the crust. Because if we just stuck this in the oven without any of this, the crust on the bottom would kind of rise up, and possibly the crimps would fall in. So this also kind of helps them stay in place. So we're going to transfer this. I'm going to just put it on this baking sheet.
That's a perfect amount of beans.
It was. I mean, a quart really does it.
Yeah.
And that will go into this oven. So in a home oven, it's probably around 450 degrees. At the bakery, we use convection ovens, so it's 425. I'm going to set the timer on here for 23 minutes. Okay, so that's going to just start. And really what we're doing with the blind bake is we are almost fully baking the crust before we put anything inside of it.
Right.
Because most of the times the pie crust is going to bake at a high temperature, and the filling needs to really bake at a low temperature. So that's why you need to do it separately. Okay, I'm going to melt some butter. That's what I'm going to do first. I'm going to take a bowl. I have 2 bowls here. Is the way that you can see still okay? Yeah. Okay. And I'm going to add, once I get that butter, I'm going to, oh my gosh,
Here we
thank
go.
you.
Yeah.
Wow, beautiful. So I'm going to measure into
Quick,
here.
ask for $1 million to materialize.
Half cup plus 2 I mean, we're working in the food industry. I don't know about that. 2 tablespoons of butter. I'm going to place this in here, and I'm also going to add maple syrup. So we use grade B Michigan maple syrup. This pie was actually inspired by working both at 4 and 20 Blackbirds and Milk Bar, because Milk Bar has their Milk Bar pie, and then 4 and 20 Blackbirds has a salty honey pie. And so when I came home to Michigan, I wanted to make my own version.
Sure.
And so that's when I landed on Michigan maple syrup, which I think is superior to all of those. Okay, so I'm going to put this in here. And then I'm also going to add 3/4 of a cup of lightly packed brown sugar, light brown sugar.
So the food world is a strange place, and I was, and couldn't go, but I was once invited to a maple syrup tasting.
Wow.
Which was really, I mean, it was cool. It was like several Vermont, several Maine, several Michigan, several Wisconsin, a bunch of Canadian, like all these different states and their maple syrups.
Did you have fun?
No, I couldn't go.
Oh.
But I thought, like, that's pretty awesome.
Sorry.
And also, I'd be, sugar buzzed like a 6-year-old after a birthday party at the end of it.
Wow. And then in another bowl, this larger one, I'm going to place my egg yolks and eggs. There's egg yolks and eggs in here. And then I'm also going to add cream. So this is 3/4 of a cup of heavy cream and 1 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla. And I'm going to whisk that up. I'll just use the same whisk. I'm going to actually, you want to hold this and pour it in very slowly if you don't mind. Okay, ready? Go.
Okay.
Now I'm just going to whisk it. You can go a little faster.
Okay, so this isn't like tempering. Like, you just don't pour it all in at once.
If the butter was still kind of warm, you might want to pour it in slowly.
Yeah.
But since they had it cool, just sort of depends on what kind of hurry you're in. And it becomes this beautiful light maple color. I'm just going to try and...
Yeah, bring it on.
Okay. Nice. Want to make sure it's all totally mixed. Beautiful. So that's the filling. We're just going to set it over here, right here. And should we just check the crust, I guess?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so can you see me over here? Wow, the magic of a camera. So
There's 2 of them, that's why.
I can actually touch this because this part doesn't really get too hot. Also because I have magic baker hands that have burned so many times.
Kitchen hands, yeah. But aluminum foil does help that way.
Okay, so we'll see that it's always different in a home oven. So with a convection oven in a bakery, you can really bake a crust pretty quickly. But with a home oven, this could probably use a little bit more time. So you would normally see a little bit more golden brown on the edges. And when we started with this crust, maybe the crimps were a little bit in the center more, so you can kind of see how when they...
Oh, there we go, great.
Yeah, when
they changed the shot, cool.
They changed the shot.
Yeah.
Sometimes when the crimps are a little bit higher up on the tin, that's when they'll stay there. So these ones had a tendency a little bit to fall in. And I see that just naturally, maybe because of the butter pockets, some of it cracked. So we're going to grab some of that scrap dough, and I'm going to show you how we do this.
Et voila.
Oh, and we can turn this temperature down. Do you know how to?
No.
Turn it down to like 350. So I'm just going to kind of patch it up with some raw dough. It's better than having no dough at all. Oops. Okay, so I've got the egg wash again, and I'm going to just egg wash the crimps, because of course we want those to be nice and golden brown. And now I've got the filling.
Dump and pour, what was the term?
Well, that was the dump and mix was
Dump
the
and
term,
mix.
and then now it's whisk and pour. That's what we'll call it. Oh yeah. Perfect amount. Oh shoot.
Except for the extra.
Except for that little part that's just, and that's what happens sometimes when the crimps, fall in. It's totally fine. It's still going to taste really, really good. We're going to let this temperature drop before we put it in the oven, but essentially what we would do is put it in the oven and bake it for probably 40 to 50 minutes until it kind of puffs up and it starts to crack a little bit around the edges. And you should have about a 4-inch diameter in the center of the pie that's still got a jiggle to it, but when you take it out, it's going to finish cooking once it's out of the oven. So you don't want to over bake it because that's going to cause those eggs to kind of curdle and get weird. Okay, so wow, that looks beautiful. So I've got this flaky salt, and I'm just going to flake it on. And that's how the salted part of the salted maple is born.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.